I'm Sarah, 39, and I should have known better than to believe this wedding would go smoothly. Not because of cold feet or planning stress, because of my mother. It started at the rehearsal dinner, a cozy evening I'd envisioned as our blended family's first warm step toward unity. But instead of welcome toasts and fond memories, my mother refused to even make eye contact with Ben, my fiancé's 10-year-old son. When I gently asked her to pass him the butter, she turned her head as if she hadn't heard me. My stepdaughter Emily caught the tension and started fiddling with her silverware in silence. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just dislike. This was war. If you're already cringing, trust me, it only gets worse, like you'll want to throw something at your screen worse. But hang in there. You'll want to hear how I finally stopped apologizing for other people's discomfort and claimed my own peace. Because weddings? They don't just show you who's invited, they reveal who's truly with you. Ben had done nothing wrong. In fact, he was trying. Wearing the button down I helped him pick out. Sitting up straight, using his best manners. But Mom? She treated him like static in a room she wanted. Quiet. I bit down my fury as I watched her lean toward my aunt and whisper something behind her hand. Both of them glanced at Ben, both of them frowned. This is my life now, I thought. My future family being assessed like a thrift store purchase, a little worn, comes with baggage. Greg, my fiancé, tried to lighten the mood. He poured wine, made jokes. God bless him. He even told that cheesy story about how we met at the school fundraiser, me, flustered with a tray of cupcakes. Him offering napkins like some kind of sugar-covered knight. People laughed. I laughed. Mom did not. After dinner, as people filtered out to the lounge for drinks, Mom cornered me by the coat rack. Her voice was syrupy sweet and cutting all at once. Darling, I hope you're not expecting me to pretend that boy is family. I blinked. My stomach flipped. His name is Ben, I said, slow and even. She pursed her lips like she was considering an unsavory food. I'm just being honest. You don't have to agree. But let's not force anything unnatural tomorrow. Seating charts should reflect actual family. I felt the blood drain from my face. He is family, I said. He's Greg's son. Mom gave a small shrug. Exactly. Greg's, not yours. She left me standing there, bridal binder clutched to my chest like a shield. My hands shook. I wanted to scream. To grab her by the shoulders and shout, "What are you even doing here if you can't love all of me?" Instead, I just stood there. And I realized something. She hadn't come to celebrate. She'd come to supervise, to police, to gatekeep. And maybe she'd done that my whole life. The next morning, I woke up with sore eyes and a clenched jaw. I looked at Greg still sleeping beside me, then at the small framed photo of all four of us from our beach day last spring, me, Greg, Ben, and Emily, tangled in towels and sunshine. And I knew. I was done begging for her version of acceptance. Tomorrow might be my wedding. But today? Today was the day I stopped being just her daughter. I was 8, the first time she told me I was too soft. I'd been crying over, what? I don't even remember. Probably something small, a scraped knee, a broken crayon. But she stood over me with that look, tight-lipped, arms crossed, her voice sharp like the edge of a ruler. Stop that. Nobody likes a girl who can't pull herself together. I learned early to swallow things, tears, fears, even joy if it felt too loud. And somewhere between piano lessons and orthodontist appointments, I stopped asking for comfort and started apologizing for needing any. So when I became a mother to Emily and then Ben, when Greg and I slowly built this family together, I promised myself I'd be different. I'd be soft. I'd be kind. I'd be safe. But I could still hear her voice in my head even decades later. Still trying to outrun that voice. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I sat on the floor in my old childhood bedroom, the one Mom insisted I sleep in, for tradition. The floral wallpaper had faded, but the air still smelled like old perfume and control. I looked around at the trophies she'd kept. Debate team, valedictorian plaques, proof of my usefulness. I thumbed through the seating chart for the ceremony, chewing on the end of a pen, trying to find some arrangement that wouldn't spark a war. Mom had made it clear, Ben was to be seated with the guests, not with the family. It was subtle, in the way poison can be. Not a slap. Just a gentle erasure. Greg called around noon. You okay? I'm fine, I lied. You're not, he said. I know your fine voice. I swallowed the lump in my throat. She wants to seat Ben in the back. There was a pause. Then, tell her no. It was so simple, so absolute. But the word lodged in my chest like a rock. She'll flip, I said. She'll make it a whole thing. Then let her. You're not marrying her, Sarah. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I know. I just, I thought maybe this time she'd show up differently. She won't. I exhaled. There was no bitterness in Greg's voice, just certainty. He knew this version of her too well by now, the one who smiled in public and sliced you up in private. She doesn't even call him by name, I said quietly. Just, that boy. There was a long silence on the line. And then, Greg said, then I guess it's up to us to show him what family looks like. After we hung up, I opened my laptop. Pulled up the photo I'd been planning for weeks, a large, framed family portrait for after the ceremony. Everyone in it. The whole messy, beautiful crew. Emily and Ben in the center. Greg's parents, my dad, my mother. It was supposed to symbolize unity, a promise that this family wasn't just getting married, it was forming. But now, looking at the mock-up, I felt sick. Because I already knew what she'd try to do. She'd shift him to the edge. She'd crop him out with her eyes, if not her hands. And the worst part? I might let her, because somewhere in me, that 8-year-old still wanted her approval, still wanted her to look at my family and say, "You did good," even if I knew better. Even if I built a life softer, stronger, fuller than anything she ever offered. I closed the laptop. I pressed my palms into the carpet and told myself, out loud, Ben stays in the photo. Ben stays in the front. And then I repeated it like a spell. Ben stays in the front. I stood in the middle of the rented event hall, holding a clipboard like it could shield me from the rising dread in my chest. Tablecloths rustled under the hum of ceiling fans, folding chairs scraped against the polished floor, and somewhere in the corner, Ben and Emily were laughing over a stack of welcome bags they were helping assemble. It should have been a good moment, a peaceful one. But my mother's voice shattered it, sharp and sour like vinegar in milk. "Where do you want that boy sitting?" I turned slowly. She was holding a seating chart mock-up, one she had clearly revised on her own. Her smile was brittle. Her tone was faux polite, the kind reserved for making a scene without actually raising your voice. "Ben has a seat at our table," I said, keeping mine level. She didn't flinch, just stared down at the paper like it offended her. "He'll be uncomfortable with all the attention, better he sit with the other children." I blinked. "He's 10. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Exactly." "He's not being banished," I said. I could feel my heartbeat thudding against my ribs. "He's family." Her face twisted just slightly. A momentary crack in the polite facade. "He's Greg's child. You don't need to make everything so dramatic, Sarah." I wanted to scream. Instead, I looked past her at Ben, crouched next to Emily, giggling over the mini coloring books they'd stuffed into each welcome tote. He looked up and waved at me. I waved back. And my mother, she didn't even glance his way. I walked over to the table where she'd laid out her revised seating plan. I picked up a red marker and drew a thick line through it. "We're not doing this," I said. "Either you sit beside him like any decent grandmother would, or you sit at the back." The room went quiet. Even the kids noticed. I could feel her stare burning into me like sunlight through a magnifying glass. "I raised you to have better manners than this," she hissed. I met her eyes. "You raised me to be silent. That's not the same thing." She stepped forward like she might say more. Maybe scream, maybe slap, I don't know. But before she could, Greg appeared at my side. He didn't touch me, didn't speak, just stood there, his presence a calm declaration. My mother looked at him like she'd found a stain on a white shirt. Then she said, cold as ice, "He's not family. He's just part of the package." And with that, she walked out, the sound of her heels echoing like a clock winding down. I didn't chase her. I looked at Greg. He looked at me. And in that moment, I knew. No matter what happened tomorrow, no matter what fallout came, my mother had just made her position clear. She didn't see Ben. And maybe she didn't see me either. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in soft gold light, as if the universe hadn't gotten the memo that everything was quietly coming apart. Emily knocked gently on the hotel room door. "You up?" I was already sitting at the vanity, robe on, hair half curled, staring blankly at my own reflection. "Yeah, sweetie. Come in." She stepped in holding a pastry bag and two coffees, like a miniature bridesmaid/bodyguard. "Ben helped me pick the cinnamon rolls," she said, setting them down. "He says they're your favorite, even though you pretend not to like sweets." I smiled, even if it hurt a little. "He's too observant for his own good." She grinned. "Like his dad." I nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "You okay?" Emily's smile faded a bit. "Grandma said something weird yesterday. She told me not to worry, that you'd understand why we're doing things the proper way. Then she said, Ben would get used to not being included." My stomach sank. "Did you tell your dad?" I asked carefully. "No," she said. "Ben was there. I didn't want him to hear." I looked at her. This girl who had become mine in ways that blood never touched. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "You are more mature than most grown-ups I know." She shrugged. "Grandma talks like the world has to stay a certain way forever, but I don't know. Maybe it's supposed to change." Later, as guests trickled in and the string quartet started playing, I stood in the hallway with my bouquet, heart pounding behind a wall of lace and decisions. My dress felt heavier than I remembered, my heels, too tall, everything beautiful but off-kilter. I peeked around the door and saw her. My mother, already seated, smiling at guests, wearing pearls and judgment, and next to her, an empty chair where Ben was supposed to be. I scanned the room. There he was, off to the side, near the back, sitting next to a cousin he didn't know, swinging his legs slowly beneath the chair. My blood ran cold. She'd done it. She'd moved him. I felt the tears before I could blink them back. Not because of the chair, but because it confirmed what I'd feared. She was trying to erase him, quietly, strategically. As if he was a smudge on an otherwise perfect canvas. Greg appeared behind me. "Everything okay?" "No," I whispered. She moved him. She made him feel like a guest at his own father's wedding. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. "I'll fix it," he said. But I stopped him. "No, not this time. If anyone fixes it, it's me." I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror one last time. Then I squared my shoulders, smoothed my dress, and stepped into the light. Because this wedding wasn't about her. It never was. The community center buzzed with pre-wedding energy, florists threading eucalyptus through rented arches, cousins comparing bow ties. My dad trying to figure out how to live stream the ceremony to his Facebook friends. It should have been joyful chaos. But then I heard her voice cut through the room like a bad violin. "That boy is already knocking over the card table." My spine straightened before I even turned. She was across the room, standing with her sister and Aunt Marie, arms folded like a chaperone spotting a dress code violation. Her voice wasn't raised, but it carried, sharp, deliberate. Ben froze mid-reach, holding one of the wedding programs that had slipped from the display table. "I was just trying to help," he said quietly. I moved toward him fast, crouching at his level. "I know you were, buddy, it's okay." His little face was flushed, his hands trembled just slightly. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. I stood up slowly and saw my mother watching us, lips pursed so tight they almost disappeared. "I've spoken to the coordinator," she said calmly, like this was a board meeting. "We'll keep the children seated with extended family so they're not underfoot." I blinked. "What children?" "Emily and Ben, of course." "They're not guests," I said flatly. "They're the wedding party." Her brow arched like I'd just suggested the earth was flat. "Don't be dramatic. It's not personal. It's practical." "Everything you do is personal," I snapped before I could stop myself. "You just wrap it in tradition like it's gift-wrapped cruelty." Gasp. Actual gasp. People around us fell silent. Even the DJ stopped fiddling with his cables. Ben had stepped back, eyes wide. Emily moved to his side, gripping his hand. "And my mother?" She blinked once. Then her eyes settled into that familiar glint, one I'd learned to read like a storm warning. "Don't make a scene, Sarah," she said, voice low and cold. I took a breath, not to calm down, but to center. "You've spent my whole life trying to make me choose between peace and people," I said. loud enough now. I'm not doing it anymore. Then I turned to Ben, who was trying so hard to disappear into his too big blazer. I knelt again and brushed his hair back gently. You're not in the way, I whispered. You're in this. You're mine. And as I stood, I caught the looks, my dad watching with something like sorrow. Aunt Marie's eyes darting from me to my mother and back again, guests shifting uncomfortably, unsure which direction to lean. But I didn't care, because Ben had straightened his shoulders again. Emily was still holding his hand. And somewhere behind me, I heard Greg's voice call out, 10 minutes to start, babe. I turned toward it. Toward us. Because this wasn't just a wedding anymore, it was a reckoning. I found her by the storage closet where she'd retreated like a queen in exile. She was organizing centerpieces that had already been set, moving them just slightly, as if symmetry could save the day. Mom, I said, voice calm but sharp at the edges. She didn't turn around. I'm very busy. No, you're not. That made her pause. She adjusted a hydrangea, then finally faced me. If you're here to argue again, this is hardly the time. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm here to ask you, one more time, to be decent. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment I thought I saw something close to regret. But it passed. Like every moment like this had passed before. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, she said, hands clasped too tightly. I just think it's inappropriate to pretend that boy is. His name is Ben. My voice cracked on it. She flinched, just barely. I've begged you. I've bent. I've made excuses for years. But I'm not doing that anymore. She sighed, as if I was the exhausting one. Sarah, don't confuse love with obligation. That boy is part of Greg's past. He's not ours. My throat tightened. He's not a burden I inherited. He's my son. He's not just Greg's past. He's our future. Silence pulsed between us. Then she said it. Cold, measured, cruel. He's not family. He's just part of the package. The breath left my body like I'd been punched. I leaned against the wall, one hand gripping a folding chair, trying not to scream. You know, I said slowly. You used to call me the package. She frowned. What are you talking about? When I was 12, you told Aunt Carla that I was Robert's child, not really yours. You thought I didn't hear. I did. Her expression cracked, just a little. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. And now, you're doing the same thing to Ben. I stepped forward. My heels echoed against the concrete floor like a countdown. I'm not asking you to love him like you love me. I'm not even asking you to like him. I'm asking you to stop hurting him. Can you do that? She didn't answer. So I did. I guess not, I whispered. I turned before the tears could fall. I didn't wait for an apology. I didn't give her another chance to pretend. Ben was waiting near the back door, holding Emily's hand. His jacket was crooked, and his hair still tousled from earlier. Hey, champ, I said, kneeling in front of him. You okay? He nodded, but his voice was small. Did I do something wrong? My heart cracked clean in half. No, baby, you didn't. You did everything right. I reached for his hand and held it tight. And in that moment, I made the decision I should have made a long time ago. My mother didn't get to define this family. I did. The music had started. Light filtered through the stained glass windows of the hall, casting soft colors across the aisle as the guests turned in their seats, programs fluttering like nervous hands. Emily stood at the edge of the doorway in her pale blue dress, clutching her small bouquet. Beside her, Ben looked up at me, suit freshly straightened, fingers twitching with quiet nerves. You ready? I asked him gently. He nodded, but his eyes flicked toward the crowd gathering beyond the archway. What if she doesn't like me there? I crouched down until we were eye level. Ben, I said, brushing a bit of lint from his sleeve, you don't have to earn anyone's seat at this wedding. Least of all hers. He blinked slowly, as if trying to file the words somewhere safe. I smiled. I love you. You walk down that aisle like you belong, because you do. He nodded again, this time with a little more certainty. The doors opened. Emily went first, proud and steady, the picture of grace. Ben followed beside her, gripping the ring box like a sacred treasure. Heads turned. Phones rose. I saw a few smiles, but I also saw her. My mother sat in the second row, flanked by relatives who looked uncertain whether they should meet my gaze or avoid it entirely. She didn't stand when the children passed her, didn't smile, didn't even pretend. But I didn't look away. I met her eyes like a mirror. And in that long, frozen second, I saw it. Her disapproval, her control, all the years of conditional love coiled in her jaw. Let it sit, I told myself. Let her be uncomfortable, let her choke on it. Ben reached the front and handed the box to Greg with trembling hands. Greg bent down, whispered something that made him giggle, then gave him a quiet high five before Ben stepped aside next to Emily. Greg looked up at me, his face full of pride and something even warmer, not relief, not joy, something deeper. Belonging. Then it was my turn. As I walked down the aisle, bouquet steady in my hands, I didn't think of the music or the guests or the camera clicks. I thought of that morning. Of the way Ben had looked at me after I told him he didn't have to prove himself. The way his little shoulders relaxed, just slightly. Like, maybe, for the first time, he believed it. The ceremony began. Greg's vows made me laugh and cry all at once. I stumbled a little through mine, choked up just enough to prove they were real. We held hands, we exchanged rings, we said the words. But even as the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I felt something else rising, a storm still waiting just beneath the surface. Because I knew what came next. The photo, the moment I'd planned so carefully. A symbol of unity, a picture worth 1,000 cuts, or a single healing truth. And I had a sinking feeling I already knew what my mother would do when the photographer lifted his camera. The whispers started almost immediately after the ceremony. Soft murmurs, barely audible, but sharp enough to slice through the warm glow of celebration. I caught a snippet near the refreshment table, my Aunt Lorraine leaning close to my cousin Mark. You know, she's still insisting on having that boy front and center. But Grandma made it clear, he'll never be a real grandson. I froze, clutching my champagne flute so tight the bubbles fizzed over. It wasn't just my imagination. The poison was spreading. I scanned the crowd. Faces smiled politely, but eyes flickered away from Ben, from Greg, from me. Like we were cracks in the family portrait, edges worn and uncomfortable. Emily squeezed my hand, her small fingers trembling with the weight of what she heard. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. Was I the one forcing a picture that was already broken? Was I naive to believe this family could be anything other than fractured? I tried to push the doubt away, tried to tell myself the wedding was about love, not whispers. But the words haunted me. He'll never be a real grandson, it echoed, a cruel refrain that clung to every smile and every polite nod. And as I watched Ben laughing with the younger cousins, oblivious for now, I realized something painful and clear. This wasn't just about seating charts or photos. This was about acceptance, about legacy, about whether he would ever be seen as family at all. And the question I couldn't answer was the most important one. Was I trying to hold together something that was already falling apart? Or was I fighting for the only family I had left? The music played on, the glasses clinked, but beneath the surface, the silence grew heavier. Because sometimes, family isn't the people who gather in the same room, it's the ones who choose to stay. The moment for the big family photo arrived like a quiet drumbeat, everyone gathering, smiling, shifting into place. I held my breath, watching as the photographer directed us with practiced ease. I glanced around, heart pounding. Emily stood beside Ben, who looked a little nervous but proud. Greg was next to me, his hand resting gently on my back, grounding me. But then, I saw her. My mother. Already whispering to the photographer, pointing subtly toward Ben. The photographer's eyes flicked to Ben, then back to my mother with a hesitant nod. Suddenly, Ben was shifted ever so slightly, nudged toward the edge of the frame, just enough that the angle would crop him out when the pictures were printed. I felt my stomach drop. The photographer clicked, the flash flashing, capturing smiles that hid so much more than joy. I caught Ben's eye. He looked confused, uncertain why he was being pushed aside in a photo that was supposed to be for all of us. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice, low but clear to anyone close enough. "That boy isn't one of us." I spun around, eyes wide. The words landed like a slap. The crowd gasped, Faces turned toward my mother, some shocked, some nodding with grim agreement. Ben's face crumpled in hurt, and I realized, right then, that the family picture wasn't just a photo. It was a battlefield, and the war had just become impossible to ignore. The room had barely settled from the photographer's flash when a tiny, almost accidental sound shattered the fragile calm. A faint crackle from the microphone hidden in the officiant's collar, a stray word caught in the live feed. At first, no one noticed. But then it came again. Clearer. Louder. "That boy isn't one of us." The words hovered in the air like a poisonous mist, impossible to ignore. Head snapped toward my mother, who sat frozen in her chair, a faint smile playing on her lips as if she'd just delivered the most devastating punchline. The murmurs swelled into gasps, the kind that ripple through a crowd when something private is suddenly exposed in public. Ben's eyes darted between the adults, wide and terrified, his small hands gripping Emily's arm for support. I felt the heat rise in my chest, an old anger bubbling up that I'd spent years trying to contain. This wasn't just an offhand insult anymore. This was a declaration, a weapon wielded without shame. My mother's face, once composed, began to falter under the weight of shocked stares and whispered judgments. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others exchanged quick glances that spoke volumes. And then I saw Greg's jaw tighten, his fists clench at his sides. I felt a surge of protective fury so fierce it nearly knocked me back. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as the crowd's collective breath held on the brink of what would come next. I glanced at Ben, his trembling frame shrinking beneath the harsh glare of rejection. No child deserves this. No family should be fractured by such cruelty. My mind raced, heart pounding louder than the murmurs around me. Should I stay silent? Pretend I didn't hear? Let the moment pass and hope it would blow over? Or was this the moment I'd been waiting for? The moment when silence becomes complicity. When the cost of quiet outweighs the fear of confrontation. I felt Greg's hand brush against mine, a steady anchor in the storm. I straightened, swallowed the lump in my throat, and took a step forward. Because this wasn't just about Ben anymore, this was about who I was willing to be. The woman who would stand by her family no matter the cost. Or the daughter who'd finally break free from a legacy of pain. I took the microphone from the officiant before anyone else could react. The room fell into a tense hush, all eyes on me. "If you don't see him as family," I said, voice trembling but fierce, "then you don't see me as your daughter." The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable, a challenge, a declaration. The beginning of a reckoning no one could ignore. I froze, the microphone heavy in my hand, every eye locked onto me like I was suddenly the center of the universe, and not in a good way. My heart hammered so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. I looked out into the crowd and found Ben's face, confused, hurt, searching for something he couldn't quite name. His small hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, everything slowed. The gasps, the shifting feet, the whispers, they all became background noise. What mattered was him. And me. I felt the weight of years pressing down on my shoulders. The years of trying to keep peace, of swallowing insults, of hiding cracks in the family facade. But now, I had to decide. Keep silent and let her words stand, letting Ben carry this shame alone? Or stand up, loud and clear, and protect the family I was building with Greg and the kids? My voice wavered, raw but determined. "If you don't see him as family, then you don't see me as your daughter." A hush fell over the room, heavier than silence, filled with the shock of a boundary crossed and a truth finally spoken. I felt Greg's hand find mine, squeezing gently. I turned to face him and our children, the very heartbeat of this new family. "I marry all of you, or no one." The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next, and I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. I stepped toward Ben, wrapping my arm around his shoulders like he was the most precious thing in the world, because to me, he was. His eyes were wide, uncertain, searching mine for any sign that this was real, that he belonged here. I took a deep breath, feeling every eye in the room burning into us. The air was thick with tension, but I didn't care. I raised the microphone, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. If you don't see him as family, I said, locking eyes with my mother across the room, then you don't see me as your daughter. A ripple of shock spread through the guests. Some gasped, others whispered. My mother's face flushed, her mask slipping for the first time, but I kept going. I turned toward Greg and our kids standing beside us, Emily with her gentle smile, Ben still leaning into me. I marry all of you, I said. Or no one. The room erupted, some in applause, some in stunned silence. For the first time in a long time, I felt the power to claim my own story, to define my own family. This was no longer about pleasing anyone else. This was about love, loyalty, and standing tall, no matter the cost. The applause started softly, almost hesitantly, like a single ripple on a still pond. Then it grew, swelling into a wave that carried me forward. Faces I barely knew were clapping, some standing, others nodding with quiet approval. Even a few relatives I thought might never show support smiled genuinely, their eyes shining with newfound respect. Greg's hand tightened around mine, his proud gaze grounding me as the flood of emotion threatened to overwhelm. Emily pressed her small hand into my back, and Ben squeezed my fingers in return. Silent affirmations that I wasn't alone, that we were a family, no matter what anyone else said. For a moment, the weight of years of judgment and exclusion lifted. I saw it all clearly now, the years of trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me, the subtle and not so subtle barbs from my mother, the endless negotiations to be seen and accepted. All of it had led to this moment, a powerful declaration that I wasn't willing to sacrifice any part of my family for the comfort of others. Her face was still there in the crowd, flushed with humiliation and fury, but powerless now. The room had chosen its side, and it wasn't hers. I marry all of you or no one, I had said. Those words echoed in my mind, a promise I intended to keep. After the initial applause, whispers began to ripple through the room. Some guests approached me quietly, offering congratulations and words of support. One of my cousins pulled me aside and whispered, "I'm sorry it had to come to this, but you were brave." Another aunt gave me a gentle hug, tears in her eyes, whispering that family wasn't about bloodlines, but about love and loyalty. Greg pulled me toward the head table, where the wedding party was gathering for the next part of the evening. The atmosphere had shifted palpably. The earlier tension was replaced with something warmer, more genuine. People started to mingle naturally, laughter rising here and there, as if the heavy cloud of unspoken resentment had lifted just enough to let in some light. Ben was beaming now, no longer the shy, sidelined boy from earlier, but a proud part of the family he belonged to. Emily held his hand, a silent pact of solidarity between the two children who had borne the brunt of unspoken battles. The night unfolded differently than I had imagined. The speeches were heartfelt and inclusive. Greg's father toasted to new beginnings, and even my father spoke warmly, encouraging us to cherish the family we had created. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this wedding could be a turning point. But I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. My mother's silence was a loud reminder that not everyone in my life was ready to accept the family I had chosen. Some lines had been drawn, some bridges burned. Still, in that moment, I chose clarity over confusion, loyalty over longing, love over fear. Later, as the reception wound down, I caught a quiet moment with Greg. We stood by the window, watching the last of the guests depart into the night. He pulled me close and whispered, "You were incredible tonight. You stood up for all of us." I smiled, feeling the warmth of his words and the strength in his arms. We did it. Together. That night, as I lay awake, I thought about the family photo we had planned, the one where everyone stood side by side, no one pushed aside or cropped out. I knew it would take time for that vision to become real, but for the first time I was certain it would. Because tonight, I had married not just Greg and the kids, but a new kind of family, one built on acceptance, courage, and unbreakable bonds. And that was a promise worth fighting for. Her storm erupted just as the last of the applause faded, a sudden, sharp gust that swept through the room and knocked the fragile piece to the floor. My mother rose from her chair with a swift motion, the gleam of humiliation flashing in her eyes like lightning. "This is ridiculous, she snapped, voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. I won't be part of this circus. She stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly against the polished floor, each step a defiant drumbeat of rejection. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to follow or stay. A few, my aunt and uncle, my father's sister, stood up hesitantly, trailing after her. Others remained rooted in their seats, watching the scene unfold with silent, stunned faces. Greg caught my hand, squeezing it tight, grounding me in the whirlwind. I swallowed the lump of grief that rose in my throat. This was the fallout I'd feared but had to face anyway. The family I thought I knew was fracturing, and there was no patching the cracks tonight. But beneath the ache of loss was a strange clarity, a hard-earned truth that came with choosing loyalty to the family I had created, not the one I was born into. The reception room felt different now. Quieter, more intimate. Conversations lowered, laughter softer but genuine. Guests who stayed moved closer, creating new circles of warmth. Ben sat beside me, his hand slipping into mine. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. This was our family. And though the absence of some left a hollow space, it was filled by the love and support of those who chose to stay. Later, as I stood watching the empty chairs where my mother and her followers had once sat, I whispered to myself, I'm sorry it had to be this way. But deep inside, I knew something had finally shifted. The truth had been spoken, and with it, a door to healing. If not with her, then with those who would follow their own hearts. Tonight was painful, but it was also the beginning of something real. The ceremony continued, quieter now, stripped of pretense but rich in honesty. The chatter was softer, conversations more genuine. Without the heavy weight of silent judgment, the room felt lighter, like a breath finally released after holding it too long. Ben sat front and center, his chair no longer pushed to the edge but nestled proudly between family members who smiled at him openly. Emily grinned beside him, her arm linked with his in a quiet show of solidarity. Greg's parents approached us later, their expressions tentative but warm. We want to apologize, his mother said softly, reaching out to touch Ben's shoulder. You're family, and we want you to feel that. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. My father caught my eye from across the room, giving a subtle nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of the battle that had been fought and won. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere transformed. Old wounds began to heal, replaced by new memories forged in acceptance. Laughter flowed more freely, and even my mother's absence became less of a shadow and more of a space where something new could grow. When the music started again, Greg took my hand and led me to the dance floor. We moved slowly, the rest of the world fading away. I glanced at Ben, who was now chatting with cousins, his smile bright and unguarded. It struck me then, this was more than a ceremony. It was a legacy in the making. Our family wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was ours. Whole and complicated and fiercely loved. And that night, surrounded by those who chose to stay, I finally understood what family truly meant. It's not about who shows up. It's about who stands by you when it matters most. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the house had settled into quiet, I sat alone in the living room, the glow of the fireplace casting flickering shadows across the walls. The weight of everything pressed down on me, the confrontation, the fallout, the fractures laid bare. I found myself wondering if I had lost my mother for good, the woman who gave me life but never quite gave me love. The woman who had chosen distance over acceptance, judgment over warmth. Tears came unbidden, not just for the loss, but for the years spent chasing an impossible approval. Yet beneath the sorrow was something unexpected. Peace. I had broken the cycle. For the first time, I had stood up not just for myself but for the family I was building. For Ben, for Emily, for Greg, for the future. I thought about the promise I'd made that morning, the one whispered over coffee and cinnamon rolls, that Ben would always have a place in this family, no matter what. And as the flames danced, I realized that this was the real victory. Not in changing my mother's heart, but in freeing my own. I was no longer bound by her limitations, no longer defined by her expectations. The past had shaped me, yes, but it no longer controlled me. And that gave me hope. Hope that someday, maybe, bridges could be rebuilt. But if not, I was ready. Because I had something stronger now. Love without conditions. And a family that saw me for who I truly was. I leaned back, breathing deeply, letting the quiet wrap around me like a promise. Tomorrow was a new day. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it. Whole, healed, and unafraid. 2 years later, the same community center buzzed with a different kind of energy. One filled with pride, celebration, and a sense of belonging that had taken years to build. Today was Ben's high school graduation, and this time, the room felt truly full. Friends, family, teachers, and neighbors gathered, their faces alight with smiles and congratulations. Ben stood at the front, cap perched slightly askew, grinning ear to ear as his name was called. The applause was thunderous. I watched from the side, heart swelling as I caught Greg's eye. We exchanged a quiet smile, no words needed. We had come a long way. Ben's journey hadn't been easy. There were still moments of doubt, reminders of old wounds, and the lingering shadows of family fractures. But today was proof of how far he had come, how far we had come. After the ceremony, the reception was lively and warm. Ben was surrounded by people who saw him, not as an outsider, but as a beloved part of the community. His friends pulled him into laughter and stories. Emily beamed with pride, sharing the spotlight as her brother's biggest cheerleader. And my mother? She was absent, a quiet reminder of battles left unresolved. But I no longer felt the ache of her absence as sharply. Instead, I focused on the family we had chosen, the traditions we were creating, and the love that held us together. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the school's old brick walls, Greg and I gathered our family for a photo. This time, no one was pushed aside or cropped out. Ben stood proudly in the center, flanked by Emily and Greg, with me beside them all. The camera clicked, capturing a moment of unity that had been hard-won but was fiercely real. This was our new tradition, a family built not just by blood, but by choice, courage, and unwavering love. And as I looked at that photo later, framed on my mantle at home, I whispered to myself, this time, no one got cropped out. The photo sat on the mantle, a quiet testament to how far we'd come. Ben stood tall in the center, his smile bright and unguarded, framed by the rest of us, Emily, Greg, and me. Each of us linked together, whole and unbroken. It was more than a picture. It was a promise, a new legacy. No one had been pushed to the side, no one cropped out or erased. Every face told a story of love chosen over rejection, courage over silence. I traced my finger over the frame, feeling the smooth glass beneath my touch, and I thought about the years of struggle that had led to this moment. The heartbreak, the fights, the whispered doubts, and the triumph. Because this family, our family, was imperfect, messy, but real. The kind of family that doesn't always come from blood, but from standing up for one another when it matters most. I glanced toward the doorway where Emily and Ben were laughing in the next room, their voices light and full of life. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself before: peace. I had married them all. Not just Greg, not just the children, but the whole imperfect, complicated, beautiful family we had created together. And no one, not even my mother, could take that away. I smiled softly and whispered into the quiet house. This time, no one got cropped out. Because now, we belonged. All of us. And that was enough.